Great. So I think we'll get started as we've got a good number of people. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to AI Essentials for Trustees as part of Trustees Week. I'm Leah Corsten. I'm the events manager at NCVO. My pronouns are she, her, and for anyone with accessibility needs, and just so that you can see who's talking, I'm a mixed race woman with glasses, and I'm wearing a red and white striped jumper. So we're delighted to be co-hosting today's session with Media Trust, a charity that empowers underrepresented communities and charities to have a stronger voice through media and digital skills. Media Trust runs our AI Essentials Bootcamp, helping charities explore AI, how AI can support their work in ethical, inclusive, and practical ways. So before we begin, we're going to just do a few housekeeping notes. So today's session is being recorded, as you heard earlier. The recording, slides, and resources will be shared with you afterwards. Closed captions have been enabled, and you can turn these on or off via the toolbar, which should be at the bottom of your screen. There should be a little CC icon. There's no formal break, so we'll run all the way through, but please do feel free to step away if needed. This is your space, so please feel free to use a chat box for reflections. But please, if you could reserve the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your screen, for any questions for our panel discussion later. So here's what to expect over the next 90 minutes. We'll start with an accessible explainer on what is AI, led by Lee Robinson, the Insights Lead at NCVO. We'll then hear from Mike Reynolds, Program Manager at Media Trust, who will share an overview of helpful AI tools. Next, we'll hear a charity case study from Helen Crumley, the Head of Marketing and Communications at Kid Inspire. And then we'll move on to our trustee panel and Q&A. So for today, we're going to have David Black, a trustee at Media Trust and the Managing Director at Google UK, Neil Gazeli, trustee at Jimmy's Cambridge, and Nick Stone, trustee at Advanet and Asperger London Area Group. We'll wrap up with signposting and a closing poll. So to kick things off, we'd love to hear about how you're feeling about AI in your trustees role. My colleague Chanel will now launch our first poll. How do you feel about AI's contribution to your trustee role? So let's see how we're all feeling. It's very interesting. We're getting a somewhat positive, somewhat concerned, neutral. I'm just going to wait until everyone's voted. Okay, I think we can close the poll now. So we're leaning towards the side of somewhat positive, neutral. So hopefully we can give you some great tools today to see how we can make that a more positive experience. So we're going to move on to our first speaker, Lee Robinson, who's the head of Data and Insight at NCVO, where he leads the Insight Hub.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making time to listen to me today. I am Lee Robinson, the Insights Lead for NCVO. So I look after our research work, our data science teams, and some of our business intelligence in the organisation. Can we pop on to the next slide? So we've got 15 minutes together today, and in that time, I just want to introduce what AI is, share some types of AI with you, and touch on the idea of what responsible AI might look like in relation to some of your governance responsibilities. And we should just have a brief moment to wrap up and have a few questions. So let's press on. I suppose for a start, you might ask yourself, well, why do I need to know about this as a trustee? I'm not in the IT department. And of course, we know AI is being used in lots of places in society. It's become quite a buzzword. And that's presenting a range of challenges and opportunities for the charity sector. So that's not just about you necessarily becoming technical experts, but it is about you understanding what the technology is, what that might mean for the services that you deliver, and the way your beneficiaries might engage with those services. So you're able to provide that governance and some of that oversight about how AI is being applied in your context. let's press on. So just before we jump into some definitions or a what is AI piece, some ideas just to bear in mind as we go. So of course, a lot of AI systems, or all AI systems really, are being fed by data ultimately. So that data might take many forms, whether that's text, image, video, uh, raw, just numerical data. That is the underpinning fuel of AI systems. And likewise, when we talk about learning, we're really talking about pattern recognition. So not just about following rules that have been pre-programmed in, but seeing, identifying, and responding to patterns in data. And then at that next level, AI systems are using that learning that they've done from data to then make predictions or synthesize new content. So bear that in mind as we go. And let's think about what AI is now. So essentially, that's any software that is learning from data to predict, decide, or create or synthesize content. So AI is not sentient in the way that a human might be, doesn't think as such, but really, again, it's just using data to make some predictions, decisions, or to create new content. So in lots of ways, you could think about it like a highly capable intern. So they might be able to do lots of tasks generally well and quite quickly, but it's likely that they're going to need some human oversight or some supervision to make sure that things are on track and happening in the right way. Another term that you might hear is AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And so that's where people are describing AI systems that are as intelligent or more intelligent than a human, systems that don't yet exist. But the idea of AGI is that that is gaining a form of sentience. So not something we need to worry about this year, but perhaps on the next webinar. Let's press on. So when we talk about AI, there's a couple of types of AI that I wanted to break down for you this morning. I suppose starting from automation to machine learning, deep learning, and then a little bit of generative AI, which should lead us nicely into talking about some of the tools and the practical examples of the way this is working for organizations later on in the session. I should also say, by the way, as we've got quite little time together, I'm keeping things really simple and high level, but certainly if you want to talk more about any of the concepts we talk about as we go through, do reach out after the session. So at the level of automation, in lots of ways, automation isn't true AI, but often when people are seeing clever systems at work, there's a little bit of a trend at the moment just to go, oh, well, that's AI doing that. So really the difference for automated systems are just following a set of logic or a set of rules that have already been programmed in. So that is going to result in quite predictable behavior. So there's relatively low risk attached to those systems if the rules are robust and cover the use cases that you need. But also they're somewhat limited in flexibility because if you expose them to new situations, to unexpected content, then they aren't going to deal with that effectively or won't work correctly. Let's move on. So just going beyond automation into what really makes for AI, machine learning is one of the real engines behind that. So machine learning is, I suppose, where we are now not programming in all of the rules in advance, but we're using a machine learning process to interpret or read a set of data and then unpicking the patterns from that data to make predictions or decisions about what comes next. So when those systems then encounter some novel data, they can apply those patterns that they've learned and make that prediction in relation to that new data. So that might be you putting a prompt into ChatGPT, it decoding that prompt and then predicting what words to respond with. Or it might be about a video generation tool, working out what a human looks like or what a table looks like and creating those artifacts visually. So with machine learning, there's some radical efficiency there compared to just automated systems, and they can be really effective in their predictive models. But on the other hand, there are some risks that come with this approach. So if the data that you're putting in to train those models is biased, then actually the rules or learning that the system will take from that also can take on that bias. So there's real issues there about the data quality of the training models that you use and the transparency of the decisions or predictions that the AI is making. There's a principle to bear in mind with all of this, a GIGO, or garbage in and garbage out. So if you put rubbish data into training, then it's likely that the answers you get out are going to be also a little bit less reliable. Let's press on. So a particular kind of machine learning is deep learning. So this is a subset of machine learning which works more similarly to the human brain. They use a technique called neural networks. And so this approach is really good at processing complex tasks, multifaceted tasks, with large amounts of raw data. So where people are talking about big data, often they're going into these deep learning models. And so these are models where humans aren't needing to pre-select what to focus on. We're just giving that data to the algorithm and letting it devise the patterns from there. And so what's actually going on under the hood is that different layers of digital neurons or nodes, as you will, are processing this data and working out what the relationship between different bits of data are, which sets up a model that allows an algorithm to make a prediction. So these things require a lot of computing power. And one of the challenges is they're not always very easily explainable by humans in terms of how an algorithm has deconstructed some data and how it's making the predictions it's making. And so the reason I mentioned deep learning is because this in particular is an approach that's used to train generative AI models, which we'll jump onto now. So generative AI is probably the kind of AI that most people are talking about when they talk about AI. And these are AI models that are trained to create new output. And so that might be in the form of text, video, audio, or other modes. And I suppose depending on what mode it's attached to, you might hear different names talked about for these models. So for text models, you'll generally hear people talk about large language models or LLMs. You might hear diffusion models if we're talking about video, or transformer models for audio. But essentially, they are all part of this generative AI family where machine learning, deep learning models are being used to create models that say, right, how can we predict what the next word should be in response to a prompt, or the next pixel, and so on. Let's jump onto the next slide. So I don't want to go too much further into generative AI at this point, because I think our next session will dive a little bit more into practical examples of tools, and then our session beyond that into what that looks like for organizations. But from a trustee's point of view, it's worth bearing in mind where those approaches are being applied in your organization. There's some principles that are really useful to bear in mind to make sure that's happening in a safe and appropriate kind of a way. So Microsoft has some guidance on this, and their 6 principles are around fairness, so avoiding things like bias, some reliability and safety, so making sure that there's some testing or there's some knowledge of how reliable are the predictions that are being made, and are there any safety implications that need to be considered as a result of that. So, for example, it might be that in certain safety critical contexts or safeguarding contexts, there's issues there around safety that you might need to think about as an organisation. At the level of privacy and security, of course, it's worth bearing in mind your organisation's data protection responsibilities, GDPR, and the privacy of your service users, because of course the training data that goes into these models will be used for prediction, will be part of those outputs. And so there can be implications there around security of information, unless organisations are quite mindful in the way they engage with these tools. As we talked about, there is a risk of bias with AI and this idea of garbage in and garbage out. And so these algorithms can have disproportionate effects on different communities. So thinking about the inclusiveness and how these models work for lots of different people and not just a single use case is important when you're thinking about introducing them. And then our last 2 principles there are around transparency and accountability. So that's really just about making sure that people are aware that AI is being used. So, for example, if you're using AI to support chatbots or some other ways that you might be interacting with service users, beneficiaries, customers, it's a good idea to make it clear where people are interacting with AI systems and where that's a real human encounter. And the accountability side of that, in terms of that the use of these tools having some oversight within your management, within your governance structures. So ultimately, it's about trying to make sure that AI is able to align, support, and bolster your charity's mission and values. So let's press on from there. Having done a really quick whistle-stop tour, we may have just a brief moment for questions, or if people want to pop some questions in the chat, I'll see if I'm able to just reply to a couple in the background while I pass over to Mike Reynolds to talk about AI tools.
Thank you so much, Lee. So as Lee said, we're going to pass over to Mike, who is the program manager at Media Trust, where he leads their AI programs.
Hi everyone, I'm going to show you 3 tools that I find really useful in my day-to-day. All of the tools I'll show you are completely free to use. You just need to create an account. However, they do all have paid subscription options, but to be honest, for what I use them for, the free versions seem to fit the bill. So the tools I'm going to show you are ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and Google's Notebook LM. Now, ChatGPT and Gemini both do very similar things, but I use them for slightly different tasks, which I'll show you. And Notebook LM is slightly different, but I'll get into that when I demo the tool. So let's start with ChatGPT, which I'm sure most of you would have heard of and some of you will be using. And it's a tool you can ask questions and give prompts to, and it will respond with an answer or suggestion. And generally speaking, the better your prompt is, the better the output you'll get will be. So this is what the interface looks like. You've got this toolbar down the left-hand side, and then the main prompt or search box here in the middle where it says ready when you are. And this is where you can ask it pretty much anything and it will respond with its best suggestions. So for example, if I say I'm running an event about AI during Trustees Week aimed at trustees, what should it cover? It will give me a suggested structure and potential topics that I can cover in that event, which I can then use as a starting point to build my event around. So that's pretty helpful, and ChatGPT is really great for idea generation. And then the other part of ChatGPT is this toolbar on the left-hand side. And this is where all of your previous chats are saved so that you can jump back into them at any point to continue that thread. And to be honest, the thing that I use ChatGPT for the most is making text copies sound a bit better. So if I'm sending an important email or writing copy for our website or for a social media post, for example, and I've got a basic outline or structure, I'll just come to this make this sound better chat here, and I'll paste it in and it will refine it and polish it up into something slightly more usable. So as an example, I'm planning on sending a wrap-up email after a program that I've just delivered, which is here in this document. So I can just copy it out of this document. I can paste it into this make this sound better chat, and in a couple of seconds it will give me a subject and it will turn those scribbled notes into something a bit more meaningful, which I can add links to and send out. So again, really helpful and a really big time saver. So that's ChatGPT. As I said, the main thing I use it for is idea generation and content refinement. So next up is Google's Gemini, which if you've got a Gmail account, you'll have access to automatically, or if your organization uses Google Workspace, you'll also have access to it. And it looks very similar to ChatGPT, with the toolbar down here on the left-hand side, and then the big prompt or search box here in the middle where it says, "Hello, Mike." And you can do all the same things on Gemini as you can on ChatGPT. But the thing I use it for is image creation, because I think it's better than other tools at creating images. So there's this tools button here on the main prompt box. And if you click on that and click on create images, and then type a description in the prompt box, it will generate its best attempt in just a few seconds. So, for example, if I ask for a cute dog walking through a forest in autumn and press enter and wait just a few seconds, let's see what it generates. And you can be the judges of whether you think it's an accurate depiction or not. Okay, here we go. I think that's pretty good. Looks pretty good to me. Pretty cute dog, I have to say. And I can then download that image and I can use it in any way I want to. So you can really see the benefits for things like social media content and building out presentations and even building out promotional material for an event, for example, that you're running. So when I need an image, Gemini is the place I come. So the final tool I wanted to show you is Google's Notebook LM, which, unlike the other tools I've run through, only works with information and sources that you provide it. Again, if you've got a Gmail account, you'll have access to this. And when you create a new notebook, you have the option to upload documents from your Google Drive. You can add in website links and YouTube videos, and you can even just paste plain copy into it. And once your source material is in there, you can start playing around with that data. So I'm going to show you one that I've created earlier. So this AI Essentials notebook is all of my notes from a course that I've been doing about AI, which I first uploaded to Google Docs and then uploaded to this tool. So all of these documents on the left-hand side are my notes and the source material that the tool is going to use. And once they're in there, I can do a few different things. So I can ask the tool questions much like you would ChatGPT or Gemini by typing into this search box here. So, for example, if I ask it to summarize my notes into 5 key themes, that's exactly what it will do based on all of the documents under sources on the left-hand side, which is obviously pretty helpful. And then on this right-hand side under Studio, you can create various different things like audio overviews, video overviews. You can do mind maps. There are different reports you can create. You can do flashcards. You can do quizzes. And the tool will generate these automatically that you can then refer back to. So if I click on reports, you get presented with a few different options. Let's try blog post. And what that will do is create a blog post based only on the sources that I've provided to the tool. It will take a couple of minutes, and what I would say is Notebook LM is probably my favorite AI tool that's out there, but it's actually the one that I use the least, but the one I think has the most potential for the charity sector and beyond. And it's really good for things like data analysis and summarizing reports and supporting with funding proposals, for example. So that's still generating my blog post. I actually created one earlier, so let's jump into that to see what you end up with. So this is what you end up with, a blog post style article, as I said, based on my source material. They've gone with Beyond the Hype, 5 critical AI truths you're probably missing. And what I can then do is take that blog, I could publish it once I've checked it over, or I could just use it to refer back to as a study guide. And anything that I create is saved under this studio section. So really powerful tool, really helpful, lots of different use cases, particularly in the charity sector. So there you have it. 3 tools for you to go and try out: ChatGPT, Gemini, and Notebook LM. I really hope you find them useful and productive.
Thank you very much. That was a really great tool, a really great way to kind of like see all the tools that are out there, and just have a nice little run through. So we're going to move on to our charity case study, seeing how we can put those tools into practice. So I'd like to introduce Helen Crumley, who is the Head of Marketing and Communications at Kids Inspire.
Hi, morning everyone. Firstly, apologies, I do have a bit of a cough, so every now and again I might just stop to have a little bit of a cough and a kind of splutter, but hopefully I'll get through this okay with you this morning. So the first slide I've got, if you could just move on to that one, that'd be great. Is kind of demonstrates a couple of quotes and a statistic that to me kind of highlight the importance of AI and the impact it's had, not just on charities, but globally. So this quote by Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, is basically saying it's more important than electricity or fire. And I think, you know, some of the information that's already been given by Lee and Mike can show the impact it's having, and some of the questions I've seen popping up in Q&A as well. AI won't take your job. It's somebody using it, AI, that will take your job. I know in my profession, and I'm sure in many of your professions, this is a discussion that's going on, particularly is it taking entry-level jobs away? Is it de-skilling us? All those kind of things. So there's a lot of discussion around that. But just the scale of the growth in 1 year, showing it going from a third of the people were using it to nearly 2/3, over 2/3. My maths is rubbish, that's why I work in comms. So that's kind of the setting the scene. Just a really quick bit about me. I've spent the last 20 odd years working in comms. I started in events and now moved into comms across public sector. I've worked in local government. I've worked in the NHS over COVID, which was fun, and I've spent the last 3 years in the charity sector. I think the slide hasn't moved on yet, but there is kind of a funny little quote, and I've seen someone I know just say hello in the chat. This was a little kind of thing I had to do for an event I was at. Sum up in 10 words how someone who works in comms and PR, and that was my answer. And anyone who knows me knows I do talk quite a bit. So Kids Inspire, I've been working here nearly 3 years. We are a children's mental health charity. We are based in Essex and Suffolk, but with plans to grow nationally. I'm sure a number of you are aware of the statistics around children's mental health that only has been exacerbated by the pandemic. All our therapists are trauma informed, and we focus on working with ages between 4 and 18, low income families, and all our therapy is free. So what I'm going to talk about is how we've got started in the last year or so, covering ethics, policy and training. Some of it has been touched on, but I'll go into a little bit more detail, how we're currently using it, a little bit about how we'd like to use it, the impact it's had on our charities, and finishing up with how yourselves as trustees can support the organisations you volunteer with and work with. So looking at ethics first, as a children's mental health charity, we have some non-negotiables, which were there before AI even came along for us, around safeguarding, data privacy, and respect for the families and the children whose stories we might tell. And these values shape any decision, both in comms and digitally. Transparency is we're very open if we use AI in any other work. We're very open about it internally and externally, and I'll be open right now. I have used AI to help me quite similarly to how Mike did it. I kind of drafted it together, asked it to challenge me. I'll go into a little bit of that shortly. But it's about integrity. It's always about being very clear and open about what we're doing. Probably the strongest one we have is around respecting privacy of our clients and of the data and security. So we've been upfront straight from the beginning. We'll never put any personal identifiable data into an AI tool. And any system that we look at, it being AI or anything, would always have to pass an ethical test and a security test. And we've worked closely with our governance lead at the charity on this as the expert. And we kind of frame it as we're curious about AI, but we're also incredibly cautious. We work with young people who are going through incredibly tough times, and the last thing we want to do is risk their privacy. And finally, again, Lee spoke about this, avoiding bias. We're really mindful of this. AI has been programmed at the end of the day. The data has been put in by people who may unintentionally have reflected or even kind of amplified any stereotypes or bias they have. So that's a real risk for us. And we've made a commitment that we will always have human oversight on anything that is produced by us and by AI. So moving on to policy, going from that initial look at ethics, we created an ethics group, and that's drawn from people across the organisation. So it was myself, some of our clear therapy team, one of our deputy clinical directors, our operational team, to look at kind of the risks and opportunities and how it all kind of tied in with our values. We put together a simple checklist, harking back to the things that I've just mentioned in ethics. Is it transparent? Can we explain what it is? Is it safe? So is it going to protect the data? Is it risk assessed? And ultimately, is it human led? Are we still making decisions and not the systems? We also polled our staff and volunteers and stakeholders, a little bit like at the beginning of this webinar. We ran a poll asking them why they're using anything, how did they feel, what their worries were, what their concerns were, but equally what were they excited about. We pulled all that together. And then from there, we've created an ethical AI policy and an AI policy. So we were very clear about that. We really, really wanted the ethics to come through strongly. And we were very clear what we're talking about is the generative AI and large language models like ChatGPT and Gemini, and also Copilot. We also agreed at the moment that we don't use imagery. I've seen some kind of little conversations on the side around the copyright, and for us, we're still really cautious and wary of that. So that curiosity and cautious comes through. We're still really, really kind of not quite sure there, so we'd rather not do anything while we're not sure. Finally, in this little section, we looked at training. So, training. We've got a number of teams within the organisation that kind of use it in different ways. Our community engagement quite often used it with their feedback to kind of help them really quickly get sentiments out of what people are saying and to pull through key threads. Business operation teams are exploring the efficiencies around admin. Fundraising are looking at grant applications, can it be used there? And our therapy team, and I actually ran a session with them on Monday looking at how they can use it, because obviously they are working with children and families. They don't want to put any data in, and we're not putting any data in, but can they use it more creatively for something that they're doing? They all come with challenges, challenges around the data, around an over-reliance on using it. And I know I'm kind of struggling with that in my work. Am I becoming over reliant? Am I de-skilling myself? So there's always going to be something as everything develops, where we keep questioning on that one. So then my next one is about the options. This is just a range. This is not everything that's available, but it covers the key ones, as well as Otter and Fathom are ones that can do note taking for you. Grammarly is kind of not strictly AI, but it's an early version, which we're kind of replacing by now using ChatGPT or Copilot instead. So next slide. That's okay. So how we've decided to use it. So this example is how the comms team. So the comms team is myself and my colleague. We use it in quite a similar way to how Mike explains it. We use it to kind of think of it as kind of our personal writing coach. If sometimes you get a block, it's because we're a small team, and if one of us isn't around, it's like, oh, I just really need to run this by someone, and it's kind of becoming that person. I even kind of, I say please and thank you to it, and kind of ask it to, but I challenge it if it says no, that's absolutely not what I want. Um, but I also ask it to critique something I've already written. I'll never ask it to write something and then just use that. It's always like a starting point. I'll always like say, can you just kind of help me tweak this? Is there a different way I could say this? And then go away and think about it. It won't ever be the final product. But one thing that we're finding quite helpful is the sentiment tool. Quite often you get a lot of feedback. So for an example, we run a Christmas appeal every year. And we use it, as a little prompt to get kind of that kind of feedback out, to put it all together for us. Next slide, sorry. So I mentioned at the beginning, I talk about how we're looking at it for future use, and this is where it can hopefully charities can kind of use it to help us. We're always, struggling with time. At the moment, obviously, it's an incredibly challenging environment for grant funding or raising money. So can it help us in that way? So in the first way, it's like, can it help us to analyze our data? Can it spot some trends we haven't seen, identify what's working? Can it help us with donor patterns and predict some approaches and new ways we might look at something that we haven't thought of before? So we've got some information in our CRM systems and other donor platforms, again, making sure we remove any personal identifiable data, but can it inform our decision making? And how can it help us that way? There's a bit around social media in our team, how it can look at we can already get some stuff around how we can post, but can it summarize blogs into snippets that work better, or analyze engagement trends, mention grant applications? It's hugely time consuming, and we're testing whether it can help us along those lines. And can it help us with our streamlining our operations? Can it help free up time, taking minutes, kind of actions, decisions like that? So what we're hoping is that it's going to lead to smarter, still data-driven decisions for us. The impact that it's had so far is we've started to use it to tailor our content to our audiences, and we've seen difference in engagement. So our supporter emails are becoming more personalized. AI is helping us understand which ones are really cutting through, who regularly clicks on content about our work, and so that we can make sure we send more of that to them to keep them engaged with us. It's helped us with our efficiency. We're using it to draft our social media posts. There's less time spent on some repetitive admin tasks, and freeing up time for us to be more creative. So not using AI in that creative time, but using it with the tasks we need to allow us to be more creative. And we're soon, as I mentioned, going to start using it, looking at donor behaviour. We have an impact team at the charity, and we're working really closely with them on how they can work with it to explore these kind of giving patterns in our engagement. There's a little bit as well, obviously, where there's often quite a lot about negative around AI, but actually in our profession, and I'm sure in yours, we always get lots of additional jobs to the job title. And there's been some research out the CIPR that has shown a rise in mental health conditions among comms and marketing professionals, citing overload as a key source. So I've just mentioned it's allowed us some time to spend on creative projects, which ultimately is always going to release an endorphin in us. But in doing that, it has released some of that time-consuming work. around what we do. Our next slide is how you can help us on and support us when we're using AI. So you don't need to be tech experts. I know we've had some top tips from Mike just now on how to kind of get going and exploring it. But it's what's really good for us is if you can help asking the right questions, starting with who's it affecting and what's the impact if things go wrong. We need to make sure it's always aligning with the charity's value. I should never drive our decisions or conflict with who we are and our mission. So asking this question of us keeps us grounded and not getting carried away with the excitement around AI. Adding it to the risk register, AI carries risks. Of course it does. It carries reputational risks, the safeguarding data protection risk. Making sure that we're logging this and monitoring it means we're being diligent, and we need to maintain doing that. And we're helping make sure that we all understand the ethical framework around it and that we're following the guidelines we put in place inside the organisation. Encouraging staff to be trained and to become more digital literacy, and that includes yourself. It's say you don't need to be experts, but if we've got a baseline understanding and we know why we're using it, it'll help to spot any red flags. Case studies, ask us for case studies. I've mentioned how we've started to use it. Ask us for those kind of challenges and quizzes on there. And I suppose it's what I said at the beginning, it's that curiosity, yet being cautious. You know, this is a incredibly innovative area of work where we can, you know, save some time, we can free up some time, we can potentially unlock further funding that we might be needing, but always kind of constructively ask those questions and challenge us on it. I've got a few references in there. I have actually had something recently, which I'll drop in the chat once I've finished, around from a guy who used to be a speechwriter for Barack Obama, is kind of an idol of mine in the storytelling world. And he's got a whole website. He's pulled together a load of information. So I'll drop that in there for you as well. But this is just some information. Charity Comms AI Hub is very comprehensive. And I use quite regularly myself. There's some information in there. University of Cambridge has got very good policy. My final slide here is I wouldn't work in communications if I didn't give you some takeaways. And every good communicator knows that you always give 3, the rule of 3. Everyone loves the 3. It's the magic number. So I will just leave you with this. AI supports innovation. It can handle some tasks, freeing up teams, and ultimately being able to demonstrate our impact more widely. 6 is top priority, being transparent and fair and safe. As I've said, and I'll keep mentioning it, we don't put any personal identifiable data in any AI machine tool, and making sure it always aligns with the values of the charity you work with, and be that question person. Ask us, learn it, and challenge us. You guys play a vital role in helping us stay on the right track. Avoid risks, avoid damaging anything to do with the charity. And I think my final bit is just my kind of details. So that's my email. I'm always happy. I love LinkedIn. It's my favorite social media platform. So please do feel free to connect with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. It's now over to me to start our Q&A and our panel discussion. Before I get started, just to say who I am. So my name's Josie. I am Practical Support Lead at NCVO, and I'm really, really delighted to be hosting this discussion today. I think it's really, really interesting. And I've been noting some of the comments that have come through and some of the concerns and opportunities that have been raised. So how we're going to run the next kind of half an hour, 40 minutes or so is that I am going to ask our panelists a few questions first. And then I'm going to come to the questions that have been posed in the Q&A, and also we've picked up some that have come through the chat. When I sort of kick off, panelists, with my questions, it'd be really great if you can, as part of your answer, introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of an idea of the organisation that you're kind of coming from, and a bit about your experience as a trustee as well. So to get started, I'm gonna start with Nick. I don't know if Nick's coming up on.
Nick is
Great.
coming up, and Nick can hear you
Great.
loud and clear.
Nice to see you, Nick.
Thank you.
Oh, nice to see you, Neil. Ah, you're all coming up, which is
Hello,
very
fellow panelists.
nice.
Fellow panelists.
Hi, David. Lovely to meet you.
Great to see you all.
Great, thank you, and thank you all for joining us. So Nick, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. Basically, I want you to inspire us and tell us how, well, obviously introduce yourself first, as I've just said, but if you could give us an idea of how you've been using AI in your trustee role and what impact, positive or negative, you think it's had so far.
Josie, thank you. I'm Nick Stone. I'm a trustee of 2 charities which help and empower autistic adults to live independent lives. In fact, my route to trusteeship was my own diagnosis 10 years ago. So I'm a trustee with an interest in AI. Full disclosure, when I'm not a trustee, I'm also helping to run commercial events for the legal sector on AI. So it's interesting to see today, there's been a lot of talk around data and privacy, hallucinations we've heard about. I can see some nodding heads from my fellow panelists. These are some of the watchwords. So that's the disclosure and the background there. So we have had, as a trustee, among one of my tasks in our trust in London, is to get feedback from the members, the autistic members, and find out what people would really like to hear. And as you'd expect, AI was pretty high up the list of things people want to hear about. We ran an event a couple of days ago, an evening event around autism and AI. And I thought that the previous speaker made an excellent comment about caution and curiosity, which has been a feature and a takeaway from the event that we ran for the autistic neurodivergent community in London last Tuesday evening. We were inspired to do it. I was inspired to run this event because of the interest we've had. I was really pleased to see the number of people who'd experimented with AI, and equally pleased to see the number of people who were cautious about AI's use, mindful about the information you supply, the data that it holds, and the risks and the accuracy of the information. I think it was good to see interest, caution, and curiosity. So that's one way I've been inspired to use AI. The other is around the way in which we embed AI into our processes. For the London charity, we will be looking at an AI governance piece. Again, I borrowed this from the law professionals that I do AI events. Big thing around is AI, writing an AI policy paper. When are you going to use it? How do you demonstrate its use? How do you record its use? Should you put training into place? And should you make sure that people, all of us who use it, are aware of the risks and the opportunities? Just going back to that law thing, I'm bound to reference that a lot. The 2 big things that came out of an event we did around on AI and law were, number 1, training. We didn't feel people had enough training. So I'm inspired to make sure that we train people on its use. And number 2 was the verification of the information that we get from AI. So in summary, 2 inspirations. I'm inspired to do events for the neurodivergent community, and I'm inspired to embed AI into our processes, but in a transparent and risk compliance manner. Thank you, Josie.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the introduction as well. We're going to be coming back to some of the concerns that you also raised a bit later on as part of our sort of general Q&A. But before we do, I'm going to move on to Neil. Hi, Neil. Nice to see you. So my question for you is, for charities that are just starting to think about AI, which a lot of us are, and what it means for their work going forward, what questions might their trustee boards ask themselves or their organisation's leadership?
Yeah, thanks, Josie. Hi, everyone. It's a great question for me because I've actually only recently become a trustee. So I'm now a trustee of Jimmy's in Cambridge, a charity set up basically to support homelessness in the city. And very, very recently, over just a couple of weeks ago, I've also joined the Cambridgeshire Community Foundation, a charity, a wide-ranging charity that's set up to create a better community and support charities across Cambridgeshire. So I'm asking a lot of these questions, and I've been following all the questions that have been coming up through the excellent presentations this morning. And yeah, I have very, very similar questions. The one that I start with, though, is really all about the mission of the charity and how AI can support our mission and our impact. And Helen's presentation was fantastic. Clearly, she's taken that as the starting point. And I think for all of us trustees, that's really where it needs to start. And of course, as trustees, that's a strategic level view, right? So we're not getting into the tactical implementation at this point of how AI will be implemented. But we do need to consider what is the purpose of our charity? What is fundamentally the thing that we need to deliver? And then what are the things that AI potentially could do for us as a charity? And they, again, Helen's presentation was excellent in that, she touched on themes of efficiency. And of course, at the moment, anything that helps us to be more efficient and control costs is really important, deliver services direct to the people that we're actually trying to support. But also, I think impact is another one as well. And I think it's really interesting, especially for smaller charities that don't necessarily have access to a lot of the sort of marketing, creative, agency type things that have probably held them back compared to larger charities. I think AI could potentially be a huge equalizer for smaller charities.
Great, thank you, Neil. And yeah, really interesting your reflection on smaller organisations. I know we've got a lot represented here. So yeah, we'll come back to that. I'm going to move on to David. So hi, David. Lovely to have you here. So my question to you is, and we've heard this already, that AI is basically changing the way that the public engage with charities, and we know that. So to give an example that we're quite familiar with at NCVO is that AI is curating answers to questions that people put into Google. And a lot of charities have therefore, we've heard, experienced a sort of decline in engagement with their websites. So I guess my question to you on the back of that is, what 3 things do you think charities can do to kind of adapt to this evolving landscape?
Right.
Please do introduce yourself first. Thank you.
Of course. So I'm David Black. I'm Senior Director for Google in the UK. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And then I'm also a proud trustee of the Media Trust, which is a brilliant charity that works with tech and media organizations and helps to connect them with underrepresented groups that are underrepresented in tech and in media. And it also works to connect them with nonprofits. I've done a lot of work with NCVO. So pleasure to be here, both as a trustee and as a tech executive. And so consumer behavior is definitely changing, and that's obviously being influenced by AI. And so, for example, to the point that you make at the top of Google results now, you'll often see something called an AI overview, which is an AI-powered snippet. And consumers love those. Where they see those snippet-based answers, they're typically, those kind of searches are getting 10% more queries than those that don't have that kind of result at the top. So users really love to get that kind of like quick piece of information, but also they love to dive in deeper. So actually one thing I think is maybe not so understood is the number of click outs from Google is roughly the same now as it was a year ago. So users are still clicking out. The question is, what are they clicking out to? And so the thing we're particularly seeing, and so this is really important when you think about your website, is they're kind of kicking out to kind of deeper, more kind of detailed, more authentic information. They have the quick summary on Google, then they want to go through and find out more. And so being able to kind of keep on, as you've always done, you've always been building out your websites, keep on building out the kind of detail and richness of the content. Authentic personal stories work really well because people want to kind of, people love the relevance of that. And then the other trend that we're seeing is kind of, because the kind of AI powered results are such good quality, people are making longer queries. And so queries that search terms that are 5 words or more are growing at 1.5 times faster than the average. So people are searching for longer things. They're asking more conversational questions. So whereas maybe a few years ago, they might have searched for media charity, just 2 words. Now they might search for, how do I find a way to volunteer for a media charity near me in East London or wherever. And so those longer terms are important. So having kind of content on your site that helps to answer those longer, more targeted questions is really helpful. And when you do that, as I say, total clickouts from Google are the same year on year, roughly equivalent. And then just a few other tips while I'm on it, as from an AI perspective for the trustees. So sort of 3 use cases that I find really helpful personally, and I just wanted to share with everybody. So first up, AI can help you to do your work and also can help your charity to do its work more efficiently. So I use tools like Google Gemini to ask questions, to help me to kind of go deeper on questions related to topics in my board paper. We have a tool called Notebook LM. You can Google it, so Notebook LM, and you can upload papers to that, for example, or documents to it. It doesn't use them in training. It keeps it confidential to you, and then you can ask questions on that. You could even make a podcast of it, which for those of us that like to learn in different ways, that's really helpful because I can then listen for 15 minutes and understand something that I might struggle to read. And so it can help to make you more efficient and productive. So use other tools are available, but the Google tools are Gemini, Notebook LM. Second, you can use it to reach your audiences, your supporters, your service users. And so we've got a load of non-profit tools that can help to do that, some of which we make available for free. So every registered charity can have a Google grant and they will get access to free advertising. So if you go to google.com nonprofits, you can find that. And then third up, to engage your supporters. So increasingly people love watching kind of richer video, and some of that video you can now make images and videos using AI. You have to be careful to do that well. And so I guess my final point is AI is a tool. It can hallucinate, it can have inaccuracies. And so use your human judgment, as you've always done, to then use the AI well. That would be my kind of final piece of advice.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty getting myself off mute, which isn't very helpful for the flow of this conversation. Thank you, David. And yeah, you touched on some tools there that Mike also demonstrated earlier, which is great. So yeah, thank you. And I think some really, really helpful tips there in terms of depth of content and storytelling, which Helen also touched on. So thank you. I'm gonna now move on to questions that have come through. If you don't feel comfortable answering it, please do just say that's absolutely fine. We'll try and get through as many of the questions as we can, but if we don't get through any, or if we don't manage to answer any, or if none of the panelists feel comfortable answering it, we will try and do so through some mechanism in a follow-up email. So just a heads up on that. I think the first question, which I know has been alluded to in some of your introductions, and certainly has come through very strongly in the chat and in the Q&A, is concerns about the environmental impact of AI. So just to give you an example, we had one individual saying, we're an environmental charity, so whilst we welcome all that AI can do to improve our processes, we are very concerned about the environmental impact of using AI. It feels hypocritical to turn to AI whilst aiming to safeguard our natural world and resources. Does anyone else struggle with this, and how are you navigating it? So I guess just any thoughts and perspectives on this. And I guess, Neil, to your point around mission and the importance of thinking about our mission in our use of AI, it's an interesting one. So yeah, any comments?
It is, and I saw Nick come off mute, so I think he's probably got something to say as well. But you're absolutely right. I think you've got to be true to the charity mission, and so I think transparency is probably what's really important there, because if you're talking about environmental impact, of course, you can be looking at all kinds of things: social media, websites. Anything to do with a large-scale IT infrastructure on the internet has a huge environmental impact. So yeah, it has to be considered along with lots of other things. And I think the only other thing that I would add is that, from a trustee point of view, it's really important to try and work these things out and have a policy on AI that you can communicate. And I think also to be realistic, because as trustees and as individuals working within charities, even if the charity itself doesn't have a policy or it doesn't want to engage in using AI as a tool, which is a choice, I would be pretty sure that people within the charity are still using it. So I think it's probably better to face the issue directly, and I think have a clear policy on it.
Thank you, Neil. Really, really good points. Nick, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to follow on from Neil's point. Yes, I think that goes to the wider point of showing your workings. If you're going to be using AI, be honest about it. And that goes into a piece around governance, about the embedded process of using AI in trusts. In a related manner, and I've come back to this a fair bit because I've been doing a lot around AI in the legal sector. There's a piece around, we're doing something around sustainability, but we're also doing something around what are your law firm's values, and how does that align with your choice of tools that you're going to use. So for instance, a law firm might have human rights and immigration as the center of their activities, or it might be commercial work, mergers and acquisitions, or it could be around criminal work. And your choice of AI tool might be informed by your cultural values that your law firm has, and these would be readily adapted to trust as well. What are your values? What kind of AI are you choosing, and how do they align with your values? So I think that builds on from what Neil is saying. We've hinted as well about environmental sustainability concerns, and again, there's some work being done that I'm seeing on when it's appropriate to use AI, and whether using AI to generate a picture of a cute dog, no disrespect to Mike, they're great, they're really good, is actually going to decimate a forest the size of Wales just to generate that image. In other words, what are the risks and rewards? No disrespect, Mike, but I know we talked about this as well, about balancing the use of AI with the amount of energy it consumes.
And maybe if I can come in on that one as well, if
Yeah,
if you have
sure,
to.
go for it.
So at Google, we've been thinking really hard and working really hard on exactly this. And so every year we make we've been making a new generation of our chips. Every generation is more efficient than the last. And so to get that efficiency up so that you can scale, as people use more, they can use it in a really efficient way. Since 2017, we match globally all of the energy we use with renewable energy purchases. And our goal is to be carbon net zero across our whole, not just own use, but our whole supply chain by 2030. And so we work on the efficiency, we work on renewables, we're a big investor and purchaser of renewable energy. And then we want to be able to get to that across our whole supply chain as well. So it's something we really care about. And I think as well, just to put it in perspective. So in the UK, data center energy use is something like their estimates vary, but on average they come in about 2.5% of total energy use. And so you sort of think about all of the other energy uses in your life, some of which will be much higher than that. And so, like if I was at an event where everybody drove to the event and then asked me about the energy use of the AI query that I did on stage. And so it would be tiny in comparison. And so that's not to say it's not an issue that we need to keep on working on, and we work really hard on it. And so we work on the energy purchase, we work on the efficiency, we work on the renewals, work on the investment. We're innovating all the time. We actually announced a project last week. So one potential way of making it even more efficient is we announced a project to put the first data center into space. And I say that not as it's because you can imagine then you've got all of the cooling happens for free because you're operating in sub-zero conditions, and also all of the energy you can get for free because it's there on the sun. So you can basically do that in a satellite. So we're thinking really hard about different technological innovations you can do as well. But we care a lot about it, and we're working really hard to make sure that the energy use is minimized and that we offset it.
Great, thanks, David.
That's on my that example's on my link.
Yeah,
it will be on my LinkedIn in the next
good
day.
to hear that good to hear that it's on Google's radar. I just wanted to come back to the points just on the importance of an AI policy, because questions have been asked about how important is an AI policy, and it's quite clear that, Neil and Nick, you both strongly feel that an AI policy is important. Just wondered if you could talk a little bit about, I'm assuming that in your organizations you have an AI policy, like maybe just a little bit about if you know how you went about that, or any thoughts about how an organization could go about that and some of the discussions you can have around that. Nick, go for it.
Right, so for the London charity, full disclosure, we don't have an AI governance or AI policy at all. Just because I've come back, I do law events, and I'm thinking with my legal hat on, yes, we're going to do an AI governance. I'm setting that up. So I'm using the use of the internet as a blueprint. I'm going to guess that we're old enough to remember when we transitioned into the world of the internet. Remember when we sit down about when you could use it for inappropriate searches, for appropriate searches, how your use was being monitored by HR, how we could, how you were using the internet to support the work that you were doing. Do you understand the legal risks of what you're doing with it? And I think some of that can be transposed to AI governance, training, use, being aware of risk management, showing your workings. That will be the approach. And then obviously around data protection and privacy, the legal things, that will be my AI governance approach.
Really helpful. Any further thoughts from Neil, David?
Just to say also, I don't believe the charities that I'm involved with have a policy either. I think, one of the things that people should take away from this is it is really early days. And also the AI tools themselves are evolving almost quicker than people can actually calculate what the policies should be these days and actually how they could use the tools. But I think any policy within a charity as a trustee needs to start with consultation within the organization. So you need to understand, first of all, how people may already be using these tools and where they may be using them. So it's kind of trying to get a bit of an audit of where you are right now. I think it's a starting point. And then, the different aspects that Nick reeled off in terms of governance and I think that is, the fundamentals of a good AI policy. But anybody that's watching this, I wouldn't be too concerned if you're thinking, oh my God, we're behind because we don't have a policy. I think that all charities at the moment are dealing with this.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point. And I hope from this session, people will feel a little bit reassured that we're all sort of on this journey together. And even people who have a lot of expertise in AI are still sitting on boards of charities and trying to work out their AI policy. Like, you know, that is happening. So yeah, hopefully some reassurance there. I did also want to mention, because I think Helen mentioned them earlier, Charity Comms and Charity Digital have some great resources like template AI policies, etc. So I did just want to put that out there. I think they've been mentioned already. But yeah, might be useful for you guys as well as you're thinking about it. My next question is around copyright. Came up quite a few times. So lots of different questions around this. So copyright issues with image creation, copyright issues on copy produced by AI and how we can check to avoid problems. So yeah, I guess just a general point around copyright implications and how you're dealing with this, or if you have a perspective on it.
I have very little opinion on this, sorry.
That's okay.
Except to say two things. Yes, that could be something to go into your AI governance paper. I think you're going to find, and going back to our previous point, I think you're going to find whatever AI policy that you're going to have, it feels in with Neil, it's going to be evolving. So for instance, when we all used the internet 25, 26 years ago, it was about don't use it for inappropriate stuff, for instance. Who knew there was going to be social media, and that we'd have to rework it about privacy? Don't take social media pictures of you doing something inappropriate and tagging the firm that you work for. I'm being slightly eccentric, but you get the point. We have those policies will have to be adapted to the things, Josie, that you just mentioned. So that's the first thing. And secondly, again, legal references here. It's a train crash, a train legal crash coming down the line is when AI gets more and more into the public domain and we have to start legislating and writing governance papers is when the courts get involved, and we're already seeing that.
Interesting.
Let me, if I can,
yeah,
if I can
sure,
add on
go
this,
for it. Go for
on
it.
this one. And so through this year, obviously the data bill passed. And so the UK now has a regulatory framework for copyright content used in training of AI. And there was, I'm sure lots of you will be aware, there was much debate around this. I think one of the principles that I think there's quite widespread agreement on is copyright holders should be in control of can their data be used or not. There was a big debate about, is that control through opting out or is that control through opting in to copyright content used in AI training? But the kind of like the principle that I think pretty much everybody agreed on was that there should be some availability for use for R&D, that the copyright owner should be able to make a choice. And so we now have a regulatory and kind of statutory framework for that in the UK, and so that gives us a lot of certainty that we can, in how and when we can use copyright content to train models. And so I'd be kind of reassured that there's now kind of legislation for that here in the UK.
So just on that, David, and this might be my ignorance, what does that then, what does that then mean for organisations in terms of taking copy from, I don't know, an AI answered question and using it in their content?
Right, so it means that the copyright holder, and I'm not a lawyer, so take your own legal advice,
okay,
of course,
don't worry.
It broadly means that if a rights holder wants to opt out of their data being used in training an AI model, they can now do that. So there's a file on a website which is called robots.tse. So if anybody wants to kind of their own content to be removed from training AI models, you can add some lines to a file on your website, and you can Google that and it will give you the instructions to do it. And so that means that the data now used in the UK in training copyright models has been consented to in line with the law, which is that you can choose to opt out of it being used in training.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. I knew I'd learned something.
The Data Bill 2025.
Data Bill 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I've been exploring this as well, David. That's a good update, and precisely the kind of things that I think as trustees we might need to know, that evolving governance and legal process. David, thank you.
Yeah, really interesting.
My thumbs up too.
And then obviously that still means I would still recommend, like, check the content that you're if you're creating content using AI, check it, use human judgment, just like you could have an employee that might take a snippet of content or take a passage of content that they shouldn't do. You should check and have the right governance process around that, exactly as we've been talking about.
Yeah, great. So I think a concern that comes up quite a lot in the sector, which I'm sure you're aware of, is around bias, and sort of managing that. And we've had someone raise that concern in the Q&A or in the chat. So concern that LLM transform AI platforms designed and learn using majority Western bias. Language translation doesn't reflect cultural nuances. I just wondered if you guys had any thoughts on this. And I know Helen talked a lot about and reinforced the importance of human oversight to help with checking some of that bias. But any further thoughts?
I think that this goes to a wider political discussion, and I'm mindful about the remit of today's session. Only this morning, Sky News did some data journalism on the algorithms being used by a well-known owner of a well-known social media website, gaming the system to produce particular outcomes. I've read a position paper on TikTok, or one of its owners, again, gaming the algorithms to produce a certain outcome. I think, Josie, again, it's something that I'm aware of, is how is this information being brought to me? And I think there is that human oversight, which is why, on a personal note, and we talked about what inspires me, my preferred use of AI is for document summary and for generating document. I'm much more reluctant to use it for research purposes.
Great, thank you. Any further thoughts on this, David?
Yeah, maybe if I can add as well. I just think it's that back to that point on human oversight is so important. And so any computer system will, the kind of like training data or the inputs that it's given can help to determine the outputs that it gets. And that's why human judgment is so important. I think that's such an important task for us all, whether in business or in my role as a trustee, to be really thoughtful around what the responses that we're getting from AI, and are they representative? Do they reflect our principles and values? And so you have to use your human judgment. And this is a tool that has limitations, just like any tool. And this is a very powerful tool. And it might mean that you don't initially notice those limitations, but it means it's all the more important to exercise human judgment over it.
Yeah.
And David, that goes back.
Yeah, go on. I was going to say, we think really hard about, like, how do we make sure that we've got really representative training data? So it's actually one of the things around people wanting to potentially opt out data from training in AI for very understandable reasons might also cause the AI to be less representative. So it's a big dialogue that we have with, for example, rights holders.
That ties back to the point we made a few moments ago about what are the values of your charity? What kind of AI are you going to use, and for what purpose?
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting. Thank you for that. I guess a bit of a sort of, in a way, lighter question, which is, what is the difference between open/public AI tools and subscription-based or premium paid AI tools? Maybe there's not a single answer for this, but I'm guessing that a lot of charities are using the kind of free tools at the moment. So I guess there's just a bit of a question around, what are we missing out on? And they're probably, just because we talked about small charities, I've heard quite a lot of concern from small organisations that we're going to head into a two-tier system because smaller organisations have less resource and are potentially going to not be able to pay for the subscription models. You know, is that going to create kind of significant inequity? So yeah, any observations on that? David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, maybe. The first thing I say is actually the free versions of these models are incredibly good and very, very, very powerful. And also most of the AI companies, us included, offer usage of the more advanced models, but up to some limit. And so within Gemini, for example, for free, you can use Gemini 2.5. That's available, which is the latest model that's available, and that's available for free to everybody. And then the more powerful model, which is Gemini 2.5 Pro, is also available, but with like a limit on the number of times you can use it, because obviously it's also expensive for us to provide that service. And so the paid services, typically there's two layers. One is you get access to the very best, very latest models with much higher limits on the number of searches or a number of kind of questions you can ask it. And then the second thing is there's usually another tier of like enterprise use, which, for example, might not use any data that you put into the model in training the next versions of the model. But at Google, so we make our best model available in a product called Notebook LM, and that also doesn't use any of the data for training that you put into it. And so I'd say there's for the paid version, much more access and kind of guaranteed privacy, but you have other ways to get that if you're smart in the tools that you use, and that's why I love Notebook LM.
Nick, Neil, any experiences on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, to completely agree with what David's just said. In fact, I think we're in this kind of golden period, right, where companies are wanting to encourage us to use AI, to learn how to use AI. So the difference between the capabilities of the free models and the paid models is actually not as big a gulf as people might think. So in my experience, so I only subscribe to one paid AI model at the moment, and all the others I use are the free models. And in terms of the majority of the work that I do, I find that is fine. Sometimes with ChatGPT, I have a bit of an argument with it because it tells me it's done something that it hasn't, and I keep explaining to it that it hasn't, and it keeps lying to me and telling me that it has. You will all encounter this, I'm sure. But on the whole, I think these tools are great, and it all goes back to how do I want to use AI? It's just a tool, and it's as simple as that. And I guess everybody that's online at the moment, if you haven't used AI at all at the moment, I would just encourage people to just experiment with it, to just learn as much as they can on a personal basis, because as trustees, it's up to us all to actually at least understand the basics of what's available today.
Right.
I agree with the other two. Yeah, I mean, it refers back to what we heard earlier. There's an awful lot of free products over there that can generate stuff that's useful. So yeah, I agree with Neil and David.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna ask one final question before we start to sort of wrap up. But so my one final question is, I've heard that AI-generated text contains hidden characters as proof of AI. Is there a way of getting rid of them? Does anyone?
That can be a topic for a new event. Oh, it's like Google Maps apparently generate weird things on maps so that people can tell that it was Google. Yeah.
It's actually a really good question. So one of the questions, so the sort of underlying question is, how do we know, and how does AI know what content is created by AI? Because what you really want to do is train content. If you can train AI on content generated by humans, you know exactly what you're getting in that. There's lots of uses of also training on AI-based content, but if you understand what the difference is and you've got a way of telling, then that's important. We don't do that using kind of hidden text, but we do when we generate images using Google's AI, we put a visible watermark in it. And so we actually put the little Gemini, so Gemini's Google's AI model, we put the Gemini logo in the corner of an image we create so that people know that that's an AI-powered image. I did one for Halloween, and I gave myself a witch's hat. And when I posted that image, I did it it has the Gemini logo on it. But we also put a kind of digital fingerprint into the image so that if other AI would know, maybe if it's on social media as well, the social media knows that that's a synthetic image. And we do the same with videos, so that, for example, if they're uploaded to YouTube, we know that that's synthetic content. And by doing that, we then flag that, and we show. And we have a little line that shows, is the content generated by humans or is it generated by AI? So our belief is like transparency is really good. And so we don't try to do it in a way that's hidden, but we do have ways of doing it that are both digital as well as visible, so that people know, but also so that our other platforms can tell and then flag to humans what is AI that they're seeing, so that they know, and that's more transparent.
Great.
This goes back to the point about showing your workings. If you're
Right.
going to use the AI, be transparent about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the comment that Helen made in her presentation, actually, which was she always starts with herself actually having created something, and then it's using AI as a tool to improve that. So rather than creating from scratch, and I think that's quite an important first step.
Yes. I feel we should finish this, David, with the picture of you in the witch's hat. That would have been a jolly ending. But we're not going to, probably to your relief. I'm going to move on now, but thank you all very much for your contributions to those questions and your insights. I think it's been really, really valuable. Before we finish up, we've got two more minutes. I just wanted to highlight some research and guidance that NCVO has developed specifically for Trustees Week, if you haven't already heard about it. So our Governance in Focus report, we published in advance of Trustees Week. So that's a deep dive into the state of governance in the sector, highlighting both some challenges and also some opportunities for growth. As many of you might know, we have a wide range of help and guidance on our website, and we updated a number of our tools and resources to help trustees. So we updated our guidance on board decision making, so just helping boards to understand how they can properly delegate decisions. We updated our trustee code of conduct, our trustee disputes process. Obviously, we know that issues can arise, so we hope that our disputes process will help trustees handle issues consistently and fairly. And then finally, we updated our CEO report template and also our trustee self-reflection tool, which is a really great tool in terms of that sort of professional development and learning as you go along as a trustee. Just in terms of what's coming up, so we have another practical support webinar coming up in November. Banking challenges, sadly, are not going away and are unfortunately pretty common for charities and voluntary organisations. So we are doing a free webinar in partnership with Charity Finance Group, which aims to help build confidence and gain practical tools to raise and resolve issues effectively. So if you're having problems with your bank, or indeed if you think this might be an issue, please do join us on the 25th of November. Finally, I just wanted to say a big thank you. Lots of thank yous to do. Before I do so, though, we are going to get some initial feedback from you. We're going to put up, you'll see a feedback poll that's come up now. We'd be really grateful if you could just give us your initial sort of thoughts on how you found today's webinar. We really hope you found it useful. So just waiting for that to happen now. Just to say that when we close the webinar down, you will see a screen with a proper sort of feedback survey. We'd be super grateful if you could fill that in. It really does contribute to how we plan our webinar program going forward. So please do give us your feedback. And then I think the only thing left for me to say is really a big thank you. Firstly, thank you to you all for taking the time out of your day jobs to attending. Thank you to our fantastic speakers, our panelists, and a really big thank you to Mike and the Media Trust. They've been an absolute joy to work with in getting this webinar off the ground. So thank you, Mike and Media Trust. And thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.